This is the video for lesson 9.5 where we are going to perform combination transformations. So we're not just going to do one transformation, we're actually going to do two transformations. So in all the previous lessons we've either done just rotation or just translation or just reflection, but in this video you're going to learn about doing multiple transformations in one coordinate plane. And the first one that we're going to learn about is a glide reflection. So a glide reflection is a transformation in which every point P, so let's just say the point is P, it's mapped to a point P double prime. Notice that there are two tick marks next to this capital P because we're doing two things to point P. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to do a translation. So we're going to move it, shift it, glide it somehow on the coordinate plane so that P becomes P prime. And then second thing we're going to do is we're going to do a reflection in a specific line, whatever that line is, so that P prime is going to become P double prime. Okay, so we're going to start at P. We're going to make one transformation, which is the glide, and then the second transformation is going to be the reflection, so eventually we get P double prime. The second vocabulary term that we have here is a composition of transformations, and that just means that we are doing two or more transformations combined into form a single transformation. So the composition is the word that we're talking about when we're combining two or more transformations into a single transformation. So the single transformation that we're going to focus on first is going to be the glide reflection. And just remember, the word glide kind of represents the word translate. Okay, so we're just moving the figure. And then we have Theorem 9.4, the composition theorem. And as you see here, this theorem states that the composition of two or more isometries is an isometry. And remember, this just means that the size and the shape is not changed at all. So the original shape should be the same even after the two transformations have taken place. Okay, so no change in the size or the shape of the figure. We're going to go ahead and take a look at example number 1, where we are going to perform the glide reflection. And here we see that the vertices of the original triangle ABC are 4, 3, 1, 4, and 3, 5. So to get A prime, B prime, and C prime, I need to translate, and using the translation rule that I'm given here, I need to translate the figure to the left 4 units and down 2 units. Okay, so when I'm looking at the x values, all of those have to be subtracted by 4. Okay, so an x value is the one that's listed first. So this x value, 4 minus 4, is going to be 0. And here's an x value. We have our 1. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. And my x value for point C is 3. So if I subtract 4, I get negative 1. So I'm not going to plot these points. I'm just going to identify what the x and y values are going to be for A prime, B prime, and C prime by using the translation rule that I'm given. And so for the y in each of these, I'm going to take my y value, and I'm going to subtract what it tells me to subtract. So 3 minus 2 is 1. 4 minus 2 is 2. Point C, we have a 5 in the y value, so 5 minus 2 is 3. Now these are my new points, A prime, B prime, and C prime. But remember, this was just the glide part, right? We did a glide by following the translation rule. But now we have to do a second part, which is the reflection. And it tells us that we're going to reflect in the x-axis. Well, from a previous video, you probably realize, or probably from some of the practice problems you did, when we reflect over the x-axis, the y value is going to change the y value is going to change to a negative value. So now all I have to do is copy down the x value, because we're going to keep the x values, and I have to change the y value to a negative with the same number. So now I have my a double prime, b double prime, and c double prime. Now I could graph all three triangles, but I really don't need to. It tells me right here, it says find the image of triangle ABC after the glide reflection, after we do the composition of those transformations. So now all I have to do is plot these 3 points, and that should be enough for this particular example. So if you don't know how to do the translation, step 1, and if you don't recognize that when you reflect over the x-axis, the y value changes to the opposite sign, then you'll have trouble doing this. But please follow these steps. Rewind this video and watch this portion again if you need to, or write some questions down so that you can ask when you're in class. Let's go ahead and plot these points and label them correctly. And please notice that when I graphed these points, I labeled them with a double prime, b double prime, and c double prime. So this is the figure that you should have after the 2 transformations that you wrote over here in terms of the x and y values. Now to begin, where did this triangle originally start? And I'm going to go ahead and graph those points now. What I have graphed in red on the coordinate plane are the original points. And where are the a prime, b prime, and c prime points? That's what I'm going to graph next, so that you can see what really happened to arrive at the triangle that we ended up with down here. And now the black triangle with the black labels, those are the prime, the first image that we should have had. So what we did from the red triangle, we went to the left 4 and down 2. So we went left 4 and down 2 for every point. And then what we did is we reflected over the x-axis. And here is the x-axis. So can you see that we took this triangle and it is reflected over that green line, and we arrived at our final triangle. So I didn't have to graph all of those, but I wanted you to see what happened from when we started up here to the points that we created here to the final points that we created with the double prime image. Now for the practice problem that I have for you here, it says that we would like to use the same triangle, the same original points as we did in example 1, but we want to translate 5 units down, that's on the y-axis, and then reflect over the y-axis. So to do that, let's start with the original points. And now on the screen I'm showing the original points that are right here. And when we translate down 5 units, we're subtracting 5 from each y value. The x values are going to remain the same. So my x for a prime is 4, my x for b prime is 1, my x for c prime is 3. And then you just need to subtract 5 from each of the y values to get the new y points. Okay, and then it says reflect in the y-axis. So once you get these 3 points completed, you're going to reflect in the y-axis. This changes the x value to negative. Okay, so change the x value when you go to do this next step to the opposite value. So the x value for a prime is going to be negative 4. The x value for b double prime is going to be negative 1, and the x value for c double prime is going to be negative 3. But you still have to find the y value by subtracting 5. And to finish this problem up, I would like you to graph your A double prime, B double prime, and C double prime. So these points right here should be graphed over on the coordinate plane, please. In example 2, it says to find the image of a composition, and if you notice what it's asking us to do, it's asking us to reflect the points in the y-axis. So that's going to change our x values to the opposite sign. And then after we do that, we're going to rotate the image from the points that we create here about the origin 90 degrees. Now, it did not tell us a direction, so remember, it's going to be counterclockwise. And so first we have to graph the points because we do need to be able to figure out which quadrant those points are going to end up in when we do the rotation. So let's take this step by step. The first thing is to do the reflection in the y-axis, which is changing these values to negative. Okay, our x values are changing. So I'm going to have -2, -4 for the reflection for r prime, -3, -6 for s prime, and then of course we can't do anything with the 0, but we're going to go ahead and graph that anyways, or use that same thing. The point will not change for that one. And when graphed, these are the r prime, s prime, and t prime points. And so now I see everything is down here in quadrant 3, and if I'm doing a 90-degree rotation counterclockwise, I'm going to end up with everything in quadrant 4 because it's going one quadrant in the counterclockwise direction. So remember, the rule here is to change the x and y values, and then we need to consider what quadrant it's going to, and since it's going to quadrant 4, we know that our y values are negative. And so we're going to assign a negative to all of the y values. That's because it's ending up in quadrant 4. So let's go ahead and write those in. And what I've written in red here for the r double prime, s double prime, t double prime, all I've done is I've switched the x value and the y value. Okay, so from the point that we were looking at before, I've switched them. And then, of course, I'm going to have to assign a negative to each y value because the y values in quadrant 4 are negative. So now I can graph those 3 points, and I should be finished after that. Now the points are plotted, and they are labeled correctly, so make sure that you also include the correct labels for your points. These are going to be double prime points because we've done 2 transformations to get them to that point. The original points right up here would have no apostrophes next to them if we had plotted those. So I hope this helps you understand the image of a composition. I would like you to practice that last on your own problem down at the bottom of the page. Well, what's different about the practice problem, the last practice problem here, is that we're asked to do the rotation first before we do the reflection. And the reason they're asking us to do that is because they want you to answer this question, and I want you to answer the question, does the order of the transformations matter? And then I do need you to explain your answer. So when you go up here, I would like you to graph the triangle RST. So if you look at the points that are above, in example 2, you're going to graph the original 3 points. And then, after you do that, rotate the triangle around the origin. Remember, counterclockwise because a direction has not been given to you. And then reflect in the y-axis. So even though they're saying let's rotate and let's reflect, they've switched the order. Remember in the problem that I just did, we reflected first and then we rotated. So try this out. Make sure you remember the rules of rotation and the rules of reflection in the y-axis. That's going to change the x value to the opposite sign. And try that out. Of course, you may have some questions, but make sure you're using a pencil in case you make an error and you can erase that error. I will answer questions in class, and thanks for watching.